It's 11:14 p.m. I'm sitting on a plastic chair outside a 7-Eleven on Gorordo Avenue, Cebu City, Philippines. My left knee is throbbing the way it always does when I've been on my feet too long, or when the humidity drops, or when my body just decides it wants to remind me of that scaffold fall back in 2009. I'm holding my phone. On the screen, a printed screenshot of a transaction history. I printed it at the front desk of a hotel I couldn't afford to stay in, just so I could hold it in my hands and look at it, because some part of me still didn't believe the numbers. The balance reads $214, not $214,000, not $214,000, $214. My name is Gary Holloway. I'm 64 years old. I spent 38 years as a union pipe fitter in Cleveland, Ohio. Overnight shifts, frozen construction sites, every overtime hour I could grab. I retired at 62 with $187,400 in savings. Every dollar of it was a vacation I didn't take, a weekend I chose not to have, a life I kept deliberately small so that the number at the end would be big enough to mean something. It meant something, all right. It meant that 93 days after I landed in this country, 93 days after I met a woman, I was sitting outside a convenience store in Southeast Asia at midnight with a bad knee, a printout I couldn't stop staring at, and a return flight I couldn't afford to move up by a single day. $187,186 gone. In 3 months. Not stolen, not hacked, not lost to the market. Handed over, piece by piece, with my own 2 hands. The same hands that spent 4 decades threading pipe through concrete walls in the dark. I want to be clear about something before we go any further, because this video isn't about blaming anyone. It's not about the Philippines. It's not about Filipinas. It's not a warning wrapped in bitterness, or a man pointing fingers because he can't look in the mirror. I can look in the mirror. That's the part that keeps me awake at 4 a.m. I'm going to tell you exactly how $187,000, 40 years of labor, disappeared in 93 days. I'm going to give you every number, every date, every decision I made, and the reason I told myself it was rational. And somewhere in the telling of it, I think you're going to see the real culprit. It wasn't a woman. It wasn't a foreign country. It was the thing I walked in with long before I ever bought the plane ticket. Stay with me. Let me back up. Because if I start the story in Cebu, I've already skipped the part that actually matters. I started at the local 120 in Cleveland when I was 26 years old, apprentice pipe fitter. I remember my first winter on a water treatment plant job. January, 2 degrees Fahrenheit, threading half-inch galvanized pipe with bare hands because the gloves were too thick to feel the fittings. You learn fast. Your hands either toughen up or you find another trade. Mine toughened up. I worked the overnight shifts for most of my career, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 6 days a week when there was overtime, which I always took. I never called in sick, not once in 38 years. You want to know why? Because sick days were missed pay. Missed pay was a smaller number at the end. And that number at the end was the only plan I had. No investments, no real estate. No portfolio, just a savings account and a pension I rolled into a lump sum when I retired, and a number that I tracked the way other men track sports scores. That was the architecture of my life. Linda made it something more than that. We met in 1998, married in 1999. For 19 years, she was the reason the house on Denison Avenue smelled like something when I came home at 6 a.m. Coffee, usually. Sometimes eggs. She kept a life running that I was too tired to build myself, and I kept a number growing that made her feel safe, and we called that a marriage, and mostly it was a good one. She was diagnosed in 2016. I will not give you the details of watching someone die from cancer over 14 months. You either know what it is or you don't, and if you don't, I hope you never do. I will say only this. I was there for every day of it. I bathed her. I drove her. I slept upright in a hospital recliner so many nights that my back never fully recovered. She died on a Wednesday in March 2017. I drove home alone. I walked into the house. I put my keys on the hook by the door. The house was quiet in a way I had never experienced. Not peaceful, quiet. After that, I tried. 2 women in 5 years. Both of them told me kindly that I was still somewhere else, that grief had its hand on my shoulder and I hadn't noticed. They weren't wrong. I didn't dispute it. I just went back to the quiet house and kept adding to the number. I sold the house in 2021. It felt like a decision, but looking back, it was just me running from the rooms. I retired in 2022, 62 years old, $187,400 in the bank. And then, nothing. I want you to understand what retirement felt like for a man who had structured his entire existence around overnight shifts and a savings balance. There was no next thing. I'd spent 4 decades pointing at the finish line, and the finish line turned out to be a 1-bedroom apartment near West Side Market, where the loudest sound most days was the refrigerator cycling on. I started watching YouTube. Expat content, retirement abroad, cost of living videos from Southeast Asia. Men my age sitting on balconies in Cebu or Chiang Mai, cold beer in hand, talking about how far a dollar goes, how warm it is, how friendly the people are. I watched those videos for 14 months, not because I wanted an adventure, because in all of them, in the background, there was always someone else in the frame. A voice, a laugh, a hand passing something across a table. Presence. That's what I bought a plane ticket for. Not the Philippines, just someone in the next room. I landed in Cebu on a Thursday morning in August. The heat hit me before I even cleared the terminal doors. Not the dry, flat heat of an Ohio summer. Something thicker. Something that gets inside your collar and stays there. I stood outside Mactan Airport with a rolling suitcase and the address of an Airbnb and IT part typed into my phone. And I remember thinking, this is either the best decision you've ever made, or you're going to die here. 3 days later, I was at a bar. Ronnie had organized it, one of those loose, casual meetups that expat Facebook groups run. 8 or 10 men around my age, half of them Americans, a couple of Canadians, a retired German. Cold San Miguel on the table. The kind of evening where everybody is performing a version of themselves that's 10% braver than the real one. Ronnie brought Maricel. She was 27. I was 64. I want to be honest about that number because I've seen enough of these videos to know what you're thinking, and you're not entirely wrong. But the math isn't what it looked like from the outside. She wasn't what I expected. She wasn't performing. She sat across from me and asked what it felt like. The retirement, the overnight shifts, the 38 years of it. And she listened to the answer, not politely, actually listened. She asked a follow-up question. I had not had a conversation like that in 4 years, maybe longer. Over the next 3 weeks, she did small things. That's the part I need you to understand. It wasn't grand gestures. It was the accumulation of small, specific things that told me she had been paying attention when nobody else had. I mentioned once, that I liked sour soup. 3 days later, she showed up with a pot of sinigang she'd cooked at her mother's house and carried across Cebu City on a jeepney. I had a fever in week 2. Nothing serious, just the body adjusting to the water and the heat. And she appeared at my door with paracetamol, a small thermos of Lugao, and no expectation that I'd be entertaining company. She sat in the chair beside the bed. She didn't need me to talk. She just stayed. I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone in the room, not performing care, just present. On day 19, she brought me to Mandaue to meet her mother. Ophelia was a small woman in a house dress, seated at a plastic table in a concrete kitchen with a fan turning slowly overhead. When I walked in, she stood up, took both my hands in hers, and looked at me the way a woman looks at someone she's already decided to trust. She said I seemed like a good man. I have not been able to fully explain what that sentence did to me. Not because I'm naive. I'm not. I've worked job sites. I know how people work. But when you've spent 6 years in a quiet house and the loudest affirmation you receive in a week is the automated thank you from a self-checkout machine. When a woman holds your hands and says you seem like a good man and means it, even partly, even imperfectly, you don't calculate. You feel it. I didn't register the timeline. 19 days in and I was being introduced to her mother. I didn't stop to think about what that meant structurally. I thought it meant I belonged somewhere. That's the trap. Not Maricel, not the Philippines. The trap was already built, inside me, years before I bought the ticket. She just found the door and walked through it. I want to walk you through the numbers now. Not because I enjoy it, because the only way this video means anything is if you see exactly how it happened, step by step, decision by decision, and recognize that at no point did it feel like drowning. It felt every single time like the right thing to do. Maricel calls me at 6 a.m. Her mother is in the hospital, dialysis complication. I'm half asleep and reaching for my pants before she finishes the sentence. I paid the hospital bill at the billing window while Ophelia was still in a curtained bay down the hall. 2 nights, medication, emergency fees, $1,800. I told myself, it's a loan. I did not write that down anywhere. I did not ask Maricel to sign anything. I told myself, and then I stopped thinking about it because the alternative, standing at that window and saying, I'm sorry, I can't help, felt like something a different kind of man would do. A man I didn't want to be. $1,800. Gone in 4 minutes at a hospital billing desk. I felt good about it. That's the part I need you to sit with. We're eating dinner. Maricel mentions, casually the way you mention the weather, that LJ might have to sit out the semester. Tuition deadline passed. Family came up short by a week. She didn't ask me. She just mentioned it. I offered. $1,200 transferred directly to the school cashier's office in Cebu City. I stood beside her in that hallway. She hugged me. The cashier printed a receipt with LJ's name on it and handed it to me like a certificate of something. I told myself, this is what it looks like to be part of something, to matter to people who are still building their lives. $3,000 in 9 days. I hadn't noticed I was keeping score yet. The Airbnb was costing me $65 a night. Maricel found a 2-bedroom apartment in Banilad, mid-range building, solid neighborhood, a balcony that caught the evening breeze. $800 a month. The landlord wanted 12 months up front, no exceptions. $9,600. I paid it. Maricel moved in within the week. She brought a suitcase and a small altar with a Santo Niño figurine, and she placed it on the dresser like she was settling into something permanent. I told myself, we're building something here. This is what men do. They provide a foundation. $12,600, 32 days. I still had over $174,000 in my account. That number felt like protection, like no matter what happened, I had room, I had time. I was wrong about what the room was for. Maricel's Uncle Edgar drove us to a commercial strip in Mandaue in a white Toyota pickup. He was a compact, confident man who spoke English with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it. He showed me the store, a sari-sari with an e-loading station, decent foot traffic on a corner lot. He pulled out a handwritten projection, monthly returns of 180,000 pesos. I did the math in my head. I didn't verify it with anyone else. The asking price was $80,000. I visited once. I asked Maricel if she thought it was a good idea. She said yes. I wired $80,000 to Edgar's account 3 days later. And then, 11 days, 3 requests, 2 wires I didn't fully understand the routing of, $94,000 more for renovation costs and operating capital. Maricel said the contractor needed payment in stages. I didn't ask for receipts that I could actually read. $174,000 in 11 days, And I want you to understand the mental architecture of that. I wasn't panicking. I was planning. Every single transfer felt like a brick being laid. I had spent 38 years building things I couldn't see. Water systems under parking lots, pipe behind concrete walls, and trusting that the work was real because the plans said it was. I applied the same logic to a woman I'd known for 10 weeks. I told myself, you finally have somewhere to put it. You finally have a reason the number was so big. I remember looking at it and thinking I should probably move some money from savings. Then I opened the savings account, and there was nothing left to move. I woke up early. Maricel had already left. She said she was visiting her mother. I made coffee, stood on the Bonnie-Lod balcony for a while, watched the tricycles move below. It was a normal morning. I decided to go check on the store, not because I was suspicious, because I was proud. I wanted to see how the renovation was coming along. I wanted to stand in front of something I had built. I took a Grab motorcycle, 45 minutes to Mandaue. The shutter was down, not part way, padlocked, a chain through the handle, rust already forming at the links like it had been there a while. There was a handwritten sign taped to the metal. I stood there for a full minute, not understanding what I was reading. A woman from the adjacent stall, she sold phone cases from a folding table, looked up at me the way people look at someone who doesn't know yet. I asked her in the slow, careful English you use when you hope someone will tell you you've got the wrong address. She said the store changed operators 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. I had wired the last $94,000 4 weeks ago. I called Maricel. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I called again. On the 4th attempt, she picked up. I said, "The store is padlocked." There was a pause, not a surprise pause, a measured one. She said, "Gary, I think we need to talk when you get home." I have heard that sentence before. Every man my age has heard that sentence. I knew exactly what it weighed. I took a Grab back to Bonnie-Lod. The driver played music I didn't hear. I watched the city go by and my hands wouldn't stop moving, pressing against my thighs, flexing, the same unconscious thing they used to do before a hard shift when I was trying to get my head right. She was already at the dining table when I walked in, sitting, still, hands folded in front of her the way a person sits when they've been waiting, not anxious waiting, ready waiting. The kind of calm you only have when you've rehearsed the conversation so many times it's already over in your head. She did not stand up. I sat across from her, and she told me. The business had not worked out the way they planned. The money had been used to settle family debts she had not disclosed to me. The store was never going to be operational. The lease arrangement was too complicated. Edgar had obligations she couldn't get into. She was sorry it happened this way. She thought it was better for both of us if I moved on. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She spoke with the quiet, flat precision of someone reading from a document they've already signed. I asked about the $174,000. She looked at me, not cruelly, not coldly, just directly. She said, "You gave it freely, Gary. Nobody made you do anything." The room went completely silent, because she was right. That's what took the floor out from under me. Not the loss, not the lie. The fact that in 4 sentences, she had just handed me back every decision I had made voluntarily, with my full name on it, and she was not wrong about a single one. I had gone to the hospital. I had wired the money. I had stood in the cashier's office. I had sent the transfers. I had done all of it awake, with ID, with my own 2 hands. She packed the things she considered hers while I sat on the floor beside the bed. I didn't watch her leave. I just heard the door close. I opened my banking app. I stared at it for 3 hours. $214. The fan turned overhead. The Santo Niño figurine was still on the dresser. She'd left it behind. So here we are, back to the 7-Eleven, back to the plastic chair, back to $214 on a screen I printed just to make it real. Let me give you the numbers, clean and cold. The the way the bank statement does it. Savings before I bought the ticket, $187,400. Hospital bill, day 22, $1,800. LJ's tuition, day 31, $1,200. Apartment lease, day 47, $9,600. The business, the uncle, the 11 days, $174,000. What came home with me, $214, wired by a church volunteer organization because I couldn't cover the transfer fee myself. Net loss, $187,186, 93 days, 38 years of overnight shifts, frozen mud, and missed weekends, gone in the time it takes a pregnancy to start showing. I'm back in Cleveland now, rented room near West Side Market, $680 a month. My co-workers at Home Depot are 22 years old. I scanned pipe fittings and I remember what it felt like to install them in the dark. The irony doesn't escape me. I haven't told my daughter Renee the full number. I told her I made bad investments. She suspects more. We talk once a week. Neither of us says the real thing. I wake up at 4 a.m. most mornings, not from nightmares, just from the quiet. Same quiet as before, except now there's no savings account to stare at when I can't sleep. Here is what I know. Desperation makes you stupid, and loneliness makes you blind. And I was both at the same time, with $187,000 in my pocket and nobody waiting for me back home. That's not a line, that's a diagnosis, and I was the last one to read it. I want you to hear this clearly if you are sitting somewhere right now with a savings account and a quiet house and a phone full of expat YouTube content. The danger was never the country. It was never the age gap. It was never even the woman. The danger was me, walking into a foreign city with a wound I hadn't named, convinced that a big enough gesture could purchase the thing I actually needed, which was just to matter to someone, to be in someone's thoughts when they woke up. She didn't take anything from me. That's the part I wake up with at 4 a.m. I handed it over dollar by dollar because being needed felt close enough to being loved, and I was too old and too tired and too scared to tell the difference. If you recognize yourself in that sentence, stop. Before the ticket, before the meetup, before the hospital bill you call alone and never write down. Get the loneliness out into the open where you can see it, because a wound you can't name is a wound that makes every decision for you, and it will spend every dollar you have trying to fix itself. I worked 38 years so I wouldn't die broke. Turns out the thing I should have been afraid of wasn't being broke. It was being so damn lonely that I'd pay anything to stop feeling it, even for 90 days. That's the story. That's all of it. If it hit something in you, if you saw yourself somewhere in those 93 days, hit the like button. Subscribe if you think someone you know needs to hear this before they make the same calculation I did. And drop a comment. Tell me if you've been there. Tell me what you would have done differently. Tell me I'm an idiot if you want. I'll read every one. I've got time.